This is Correctional Officers in the News with your host, Marone Coons.
Hello. This report comes to us from North Carolina. North Carolina is having a very serious problem in retaining correction officers. They are running a 20% vacancy rate in the position of correction officers. And the article's headline is North Carolina Correctional Officers leaving as fast as they can be hired. And it talks about the fact that in 2018, they hired 1,812 officers. But also in 2018, they lost 1,742 officers, meaning that they only had a net gain of 70 officers in that hiring period in 2018. So officers are leaving this job, are leaving the correction department in North Carolina, which means that the officers that remain have to work long hours of overtime, and it's very stressful. There's a quote from an officer in this article that says, and I quote, "We are allowing all of those inmates out, up to almost 150 inmates for one or two officers to maintain control of, to watch for oversight purposes." So what the officer is saying is that they're at the point where they have 150 inmates being watched by one or two officers, which is unacceptable. Now, this North Carolina correctional system is been, I would say, dysfunctional for some time. They had 3 officers that were killed in 2017. You had a Sergeant, Megan Callahan, who was murdered in 2017 at Birdie Correctional Institution, and she was beat to death with a fire extinguisher. And then you had 2 other officers, Justin Smith and Wendy Shannon, who were killed at Pasquotank Correctional Institute, and they were killed with hammers and scissors. So this is a very serious problem that's going on in North Carolina. And one of the things that stands out to me in this article is the fact that they haven't really made the necessary changes as far as security for officers since these incidents happened. Now let me read you another quote from this article, and it says, "The department is in the process of implementing stab-resistant shirts and personal body alarm technology for employees to use in an emergency. However, it is not clear how long it will take to make that operational. Employees are in the process of receiving radios to use." All right, so this is 2019. 3 officers were killed in 2017, yet they still have not implemented stab-proof shirts or personal body alarms. And they're just starting to roll out radios for officers. And then they go even further to say, for staff who currently don't have the radios, we have deployed other less technological devices such as whistles, so that everyone has some kind of personal alarm device should they be in distress. Now, they are trying to substitute whistles for personal body alarms. So this is a very dysfunctional department, and they are not taking the officers' safety seriously. Okay, as I said, they have 1 or 2 officers watching 150 inmates. The officers don't have stab-proof vests or shirts. They don't have personal body alarms. They're just rolling out radios, and they're giving officers whistles. So this is coming behind 3 officers being murdered in this system in 2017. You would think that all of this stuff would already be in place by now, but it hasn't been. But the one thing that they made sure that they put in place, of course, is cameras. All right, so the article says that the Department of Public Safety has also installed 1,320 cameras since April 2017. So their response to officers being murdered and assaulted is to install more cameras, because they haven't retained more staff. Matter of fact, this 20% deficit in correction officers is a historic high. So obviously they haven't brought on more staff. So they have installed more cameras. And it goes on to say the agency is spending $1.7 million to install nearly 1,200 cameras in the first half of this year. So they are doubling down on the cameras. They are spending more money on the cameras, and they are not concerned, or they're not acting quick enough to guarantee the safety of these officers that are working in these facilities. And they're overworking the officers. The officers are working overtime, which is very stressful mentally and physically, and it takes a toll on the officer's family, because if you're going to work and you don't know when you're going to be going home because you may have to work overtime, then it has a toll on your family, because you can't schedule events, you can't schedule cookouts, you can't go to weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, and things of that nature. So it has a stress on the family as well. So this needs to be dealt with. And one of the other things that I found very disturbing about what's going on in North Carolina is that in North Carolina, the chief of the Department of Public Safety just received a $23,000 raise. Now, I know that his job is broader than just covering the Department of Correction, but a $23,000 raise for someone who is overseeing an agency that has a 20% deficit and has had murders in the last 2 years and has not implemented the security devices or equipment that the officers need to stay safe, I don't see where you can justify a $23,000 raise. And it also goes on to say in a different article that I'm going to post, it indicates that this chief, this public service, Department of Public Service chief, has in the last 2 years has received an additional $41,000 in total raises. $41,000, where officers are barely getting a 5% raise. Officers are making between $35,000 and $40,000, and here we have a public safety director who's not holding up his side of the bargain and protecting the officers and creating a stable, safe work environment for the officers, getting a $41,000 raise. So this department is out of control. It's understandable that people are leaving this department because the administration does not seem serious about bringing in quality officers and paying them what they deserve to be paid to do this job. Now, there's another article here that talks about some of the steps that the department in North Carolina is taking to hire more officers. And one of the things that they're going to do, or they've done, is they've cut out the psychological screening for officers. So now officers that would ordinarily be psychologically screened before they become correctional officers are not being screened now. So they're hiring, or they are willing to hire people. They're lowering the standard, put it that way. They're lowering the standard for correctional officers in this system just to try to get them in. But it's going to create even more problems when you have people that are not suitable for this job taking this job. All right, you're going to have more incidents. You're going to have more contraband being entered into the system and things of that nature, because they are choosing to do away with psychological exams, which is kind of unheard of. When you're dealing in law enforcement and you're training people with guns, pepper spray, other chemical agents, and you're dealing with inmates, criminals, you need to have a psychological exam in order to make sure that the people that you're hiring are suitable for the job. The article about the weakening in the job screening, goes on to say that when they did have the screening, they found that 11% of the people that they screened were not suitable for this job. And they screened them out. And then another 7% were not medically suitable for the job. So they screened them out. So had they applied now, these 11% that are unsuitable would have been on the job already. And they'll probably come back now, being that the screening is being weakened. So this is not a solution. I understand why officers are leaving this job, but when officers leave the job, experience leaves the job, and it makes the job that much harder because you have less experienced officers, and then you have more stress on the officers that stay. They said also in the article that 55% of the officers that come in, they leave in 2 years. So they hire officers and 55% of them leave in 2 years. So they see the problem. The officers come in and they see that they're being overworked, that the administration is really not serious about their safety, and they leave. And I can't blame them. And on the Correctional Officers in the News Facebook page, there's a lot of comments from our correctioneers, and I can't argue with anything that the officers are saying. One officer says prison violence and the unsafe conditions are a direct result of liberalism. And then another officer, correctioneer, is saying New York set the standard for abuse of officers. This is by design to eviscerate officers' ability to work in these professions. And it goes on and on. Officers know what is happening here, and it needs to stop. So for the officers that stay on these jobs, I wish you the best. Please watch your back. Don't be discouraged. It's a tough job, but you can do it, and hopefully help is on the way. So until next time, as always, peace and stay safe.
This is COTV, bringing you the latest in correctional news. Subscribe now and click the notification bell to stay updated with the world of corrections. This is Correctional Officers in the News with your host, Lerone Kuntz.